meeting order. And I guess I'm just going to kind of turn it over to JR and Lila to go through everything for us and explain what they've got here, and we'll follow along.
So I said this earlier before everybody was here, but with the new budget process, the general fund has to be finalized and put into place. We have to notify the county clerk by July 15th of our intent to exceed the revenue neutral rate and what that mill levy rate will be. The other funds, we want to start working on them and get them as close to being done as possible, but we can change those until the budget hearing. So if we see a need to make changes to any of the other funds after we've kind of finalized them this time, we can still make changes to those until the budget hearing.
What do you mean by exceeding or adding to the mill levy?
So the revenue neutral rate this year, they got rid of the tax lid. With Senate Bill 13. And so what it is now is you cannot exceed the dollar amount that you levied the year before. So we get from the county clerk what the mill levy rate would be based on current valuations to give us that same dollar amount that we levied last year. By virtue of just having the library, for one thing, we will always exceed the revenue neutral rate if valuations keep going up, because I can't remember what he sent me here. We have to levy 4 mills for them by that ordinance that we have, and the revenue neutral rate for the library is, 4.207. So I'm sorry, I was wrong on that. So, but the revenue neutral rate for us, for the general fund, is 36.124 mills. So whatever we come up with when the auditors look at this and calculate the revenue rate, if it's above that, which it likely will be, then we hold the hearing. We hold a revenue neutral rate hearing to give the public an opportunity to talk about it and bring their concerns. And then if you listen to everybody, you have to give everybody an opportunity to speak. And when they're done, then the council will pass a resolution to exceed the revenue neutral rate. That's really the big thing, is the hearing. Next year, every individual will get a letter to tell them the dollar amount that their taxes are going to increase for every entity that is increasing their taxes. So I think probably we want to try to, not get crazy and see what our mill levy rate is after the auditors take what we give them, and then if it's too high, if you decide that's too high, the fix to that would be to transfer more funds in to the general fund from a utility fund, which
we have to do anyway, because the general is not supplied its money completely by the mill levy, but it's the only one that is used for taxes. That's why it's through this whole process. It's because of the levy.
Yes.
So it's only the general fund that has to be?
Because it's the only one that levies taxes, and the library.
Tax relief.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
it's ridiculous is what it is. It's still a budget. It's like a utility, just like something else. You need money, you raise the levy. You need revenue, you raise the electric rate. But because of
the whole, Senate Bill 13 just
special,
mind-boggling.
it's going to be costly too, because somebody has to pay for all those notifications. I think I don't know if it's split between the county and the city, or the state's paying for it.
Whoever's having to send out notification, but then again,
split.
Everybody has a budget hearing that nobody shows up to. So,
but they might now. I mean, that's the goal.
If they know that dollar amount, how much they're doing up, they might start showing up, because
I don't think on the city side, where we don't rely solely on taxes.
Right. It's really kind of a small amount of our whole thing.
We got high taxes here.
And we don't use it for streets or anything. You think I haven't heard that a million times in my office? I don't know how many appeal hearings.
Everybody. even the locals that have been here for 50 years still say the same thing too.
The problem is that their total taxes are high. The county is high.
It is high.
And all that's going to the county and other entities. The city's just watered it.
Yeah.
Because Colby's the only one that's lower than us for an extremely large distance.
City-wise.
They're 32, I think. I mean, they're not that terribly much more than we are. It's a city.
So, okay, I think that was all. Did anybody have any questions on that? I'll do my best to answer. I'm not an expert, but that's my understanding. Amanda probably knows as much about it, if not more, than I do. So, I guess we'll just get started here. We also have to, once the mill levy is set in the general fund, we have to also set the date of the hearing. We have to let the county clerk know when the date of our hearing will be, and it can be any time between August 20th and September 20th. We can. My only concern with that is we have to have this hearing and the budget hearing, and if you're going to do it before a council meeting, you need to make sure you allow plenty of time, so if there is any public comment, everybody has the opportunity to speak as much as they want. So this year probably won't be a big deal, and who knows, next year I don't know, but it just depends. So that's the only issue with having it on the same night as the council meeting night.
I feel like the budget hearing, we always do this. You know.
And they may not.
They may not, they may, it's hard telling, but.
So that would be something for you guys to think about.
But could you limit people to how long they can talk?
Well, I went to 10 or 11 o'clock at night for our meetings now anyway, so.
And that was so fun.
Hey, we used to start at 11:30, so we were
Yeah. we used to start
11:30
at
midnight.
I think,
It got really crazy.
Used to, it was even worse, we only had one meeting a month.
Oh, wow.
It was midnight to 1, until we switched to 2
Brutal.
Yeah.
I don't know about limiting their time. I think if they started rambling, you could certainly, but you have to give them the opportunity to speak. So anyway, once we get this process done tonight and I send it off to Danielle, she will return to us her numbers so we know what the mill levy is and the neighborhood revitalization and all those things that I don't know how to calculate. And once we get that back, we might want to consider having another short meeting to go over what she has sent back and make sure that it all looks good to you guys, and then decide on the hearing date, and then I'll get it over there. So, new papers that I handed out tonight, I just had to add a couple of things that I had missed, so make sure we're looking at the ones I handed out tonight. JR, it has the change in the utility fund, and then a couple of things that I had just not included in the original one I printed. So, first page is just the general revenue. I don't know that there's anything.
I had a question on rent. Is that going to be different with the rental of the PD?
Yes,
station?
so that includes that, yeah.
Okay.
And so if you have any specific questions, I can answer all of those. I have printed out here all of the different things that make up each one of these line items. So, yes, the PD rent is included in rent now.
Okay.
One thing I will note here that for whatever reason, last year in the 2020 budget, we had asked to have that line item put in there for the options and all of those, and they took it out and they added it back into the general government again. But if you want it as a line item, I will make sure that that comes back out and goes in as a line item.
It was done so it wasn't overlooked
Yes.
at budget time.
And how much did we,
5.
because
Budgeted.
we do 15 and 15, and then we left ourselves some room
Yes.
for somebody else?
Yes. So do you guys want that back in the?
I would like it broke out just so we don't forget.
Yeah.
We don't want to forget that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's good to have it that way.
So when we do that, when we look at, well, I'll wait till we get to the expenses, and I'll show you where that's going to change when we do that. But so anyway, these are the revenues. Nothing too. JR, did you see anything that looked out of whack? So again, the only thing that could possibly change would be the transfers coming in. If we needed to get the mill levy down a little bit, we'll bring in some more money from another fund. Does that make sense? Okay. The next page, actually go to the third page. The third page is what's called the detail, and it breaks down each of the general categories, the law enforcement, municipal court, and breaks those down into salaries, commodities, and contractual. So that is where, when we make that change with the $5,000, it's going to come out of the general government commodities. That'll be reduced then by $5,000. The streets, we've got that bumped up. Of course, we keep hoping to hire another person, so that's why 2022 is higher than what we actually spent last year and what we project to spend this year. JR, you had asked about using the 2021 budget numbers for that. I didn't. I can increase that if you want, if you think you're still going to hire somebody this year to fill that spot.
Given the availability, yes. I mean, if the person would show up.
We can increase that, and the only difference that would make is then in the cash that's going to carry forward into next year. So it doesn't really significantly impact it too much, except for it'll reduce, if I raise that, it'll reduce the cash coming in at the beginning next year, and we will need to bump up our transfers. So that's kind of up to you, JR, if you want me to increase that for this year.
That's just within this
That's just an estimate for this year.
year.
It doesn't really affect the 2021 budget at all.
I guess the primary thing about that is if you did hire somebody, you could utilize it through a fund that does have the funds until you
Good.
and transfer. So I think it's a moot point. Honestly, I mean, if you would still hire somebody and they would end up being streets, you would fund it through one of the other ones until you get to that point, change the budget the following
Yep,
year. So
we
I'm
can
fine
do
with
that.
If
Okay.
there's a reason to change it. That's just wishful thinking.
Let's see, down, it's not a significant amount of change until we get down to the health insurance. So I'm just going to point out why. So we've always had it at $250 for I don't know how many years, ever since I've been here and long before. That was kind of a cap that the council had decided we wouldn't go over. I put it at $258, and the reason I put it at $258 is that's what it would be next year if we have our existing employees plus the one that we just recently lost, plus 2 more, and the 10% increase. Then that's what it would cost next year. So,
Wishful thinking, but it could happen. If it happens, we want to be able to, yeah.
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 I think also next year might be, I think we should maybe start looking at other, not just going with the Blue Cross that we have. We need to maybe look at some other plans and see if we can save in that area. I know we have a grandfathered plan. It's a fabulous plan. It's wonderful for the employees. But we probably ought to do, I'm sorry.
Speak for yourself.
Oh, it's been good for me.
It's good for...
No, it's a good plan, but I think it's maybe time to look at some other things next year.
It's been a long time since we've done that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, do you want me to leave it at that?
I would
I think so, right,
yes.
yeah, for now, because we don't
Set
know if
this
we're
on.
going to.
Was that 250 something that has to be voted on, though?
No.
It
It was
was
just a
just
budget
the
thing, and it was
budget.
just something
Okay,
that
that's what I
council.
didn't know.
It's kind of a
How it
budget
was-
cap that we've had on there for years.
How it was proposed.
And what's funny about that is that was the cap when you had like 20 employees.
Yes. And it's just always been it's almost more a talking point. I mean, there was a time when we didn't replace employees based on that number as opposed to changing that. Now, I will say at one time, I really truly believe we had more than what the city required in employees. That obviously is pendulum swung a little too far the other way at this point. But yeah, there was a time when we did that. just because it was rising so fast.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there was a few years in a row there, it was up almost 50%, I think, in a 3-year period. It really went wild on us.
And last year was crazy.
Yeah,
So we
last
don't know
year
what
was
next
crazy.
year's going to be. So that's why I'm saying next year
Yeah.
we're going to probably want to
The
look
problem
at this.
is you only know you have a problem once they tell you, and that's way too late to compare
It is.
anything to it. So
Mhm.
that's why now's the right time to talk about that.
What about on the contractual with Parks and Recreation? Is that where we contracted with DJ on the
I would
spring?
assume that's where we would pay.
But it went down, so I...
Contracted with who?
DJ to spray the islands and the Burnside Park and that kind of stuff.
We haven't gotten a bill for that.
I was just curious because the actual budget from 2021 to 2022 went down, and if we picked that up, I didn't know
Okay, let me look at why that would have gone down. Which one is it? Contractual.
contractual.
But that's a line item within it. The total fund is up significantly.
Yeah, but I see what you're talking about. Let me take a look at that.
I just didn't...
Is that this year that he's doing that?
Yeah, he
No.
started that, but I just thought if
Yeah.
he's doing that plus chemical, I know,
Mhm.
over the roof, and I didn't
Right.
know.
So what would have made a difference on that is I haven't seen a bill for that yet. And so in the 2020, when I'm doing this, I'm looking at what we've spent so far this year. And I guess I forgot about this.
Let me just get a handle from him on his expenses to this point, and we'll just put that,
We'll just-
square that up.
I'll
Because
add that in there.
I very much hope we continue to.
I just thought that was odd that we just
Sure.
contracted with him and then we budgeted less for next year, and I just wanted to make sure that we were...
Let me see why, 'cause now I'm curious, let me see why last year was up. And that, let me give you an explanation for that. Because what I do when I'm looking at this is I'll look at what we actually spent last year, and then I'll look at what we've spent thus far this year, and then I'll compare that to the past 5 years and kind of see if there's any trends. And what will stand out to me is if something is significantly higher or lower in 2020 than it had been, then I look at, well, why is that? Was it something unusual? So, hold on here a second. That's in contractual. Oh, no, that was... Okay, so the estimate for 20... Hold on here a second. Okay, so no, we're budgeting more than we did in 2020. So we're budgeting 2,730. We actually spent 2,316. The reason that's less than the 2021 estimate is because that includes utilities. And that was the Midwest Energy excessive bills that we had. And so that's why it's high for 2021. But we absolutely need to include that.
If we didn't have DJ in 2020, but we will for 2021 and 22, we probably want to make sure we have
Yes.
enough for whatever that's going to be.
Yes. So let me make myself a note on that. That's contractual. Yeah, if he can just give us a rough idea, increase for mowing.
And then the Kellepon,
Yes.
they're going to pay that, you think, Colors?
That was
Oh,
what we've been told.
okay.
That's what we want to clarify there because of the contingency.
Thanks for bringing that up. I didn't even realize that.
I just noticed from the estimate from this year to next year, I'm going, if we just picked up more contract work, don't we cover it? But that makes sense with the utilities one.
Yeah, that's what I looked at.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we'll find that out. Okay. Anything else on that page?
What's the contractual for the pool?
So that is probably utilities, but let me look and see what else there is. Pool, contractual. That is all utilities. Phone, Midwest Energy. The gas bill's pretty high for the pool. It's really high this year. No, not last year. No, this year. It wasn't this high for the pool this year. It's just always high. Last year, in 2019, it was 4,047. It was actually down last year. Um, and commodities is pretty much everything else.
It's hard to budget, utilities and stuff, the way things are right now.
Especially after this last year.
Well, and then, just like right now, they're saying there's gonna be a lot of shortage of gas this weekend over the United States,
Well,
4th of July. Yep. They've already,
oh,
it's unplanned.
yeah, it just shuffles here and there and this and that, and you can't figure it out and stuff. And so it makes it hard for people to set budgets too, when you don't know what's happening and that much change.
Any other questions on that page? So the third page, actually it was the second page, but that is just, oops.
I have no numbers.
What's
We're
that?
getting mixed up.
I know, I didn't, well, down at the bottom, we're on page, no number. I'm sorry. Says at the top, general, resources available, expenditures. That's the one I'm on. So that one, the top section up there takes the numbers from that page that we just looked at, takes the totals and pops them in here. I'm sorry. Next year I'll number my pages. Threw in $20,000 for property cleanup. We didn't spend any last year for property cleanup, but we had something in the budget last year, so I put it back in. If you want to increase that or leave it where it's at, I don't know. JR, do you anticipate any property cleanup happening?
I hope not. I hope they're cleaned up by the property owners. We have to have some money available to be able to do it.
I'm going to say where we have the two condemnation proceedings, I think we want to budget something to see those.
One's going to
More
drop.
than-
One of those is going to drop.
But we might pick up
Yeah,
two or three more.
Right.
I
You've got
think we wanna-
CCDC on here, but then you have economic development program above that. Is that
Yes.
right for advertising?
No, the Economic Development Program is, I don't know why they're calling it that exactly. That's not really what that is. That is the utility incentives that we give to new businesses. So that's what that is.
And we don't ever have to pay anything for the vet clinic or anything for an animal shelter or animal.
So no, and we don't have our shelter anymore. So what that always was in the past was the license fee to the state for the animal shelter. And Cody has said we can't use that shelter. It won't pass inspection. So
Yeah, I didn't know if they ever had anything that they passed us.
yes, sometimes they'll bill us for something if a dog is picked up or a dog at large, but that would go under the municipal court costs.
I know this last year we increased, like, the senior center CCDC options. Was it this year, or the last year that we did options and
Yes.
the other one? Are we going to keep them the same, or?
Used to, the senior citizens always came in and Art and Ken gave us a lengthy deal every time, but it was nice that they came in and thanked us and everything, and so, I don't know, I guess,
Do they even know now? Who's doing that? Who's doing that?
and I don't know
Or
who,
they just aren't they looking for it? I thought they were looking for it, so I didn't know that.
I don't know. think Cindy's kind of in charge of it now, so.
There's county funding there too, isn't there?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, for the senior center.
Let me
I
see.
don't know either. I feel like they should come and present something to us, like Helen did last night.
Scott wants to be here till
What's
midnight.
that?
I said, you want to be here till midnight, or relive your glory days.
No, but
At a minimum, to provide a year closing of their
Year closing of their expenses.
She did come to do something last year, didn't she? Or she said something?
She said something last
She
year.
said something, I think, because of, I don't know.
Do you want me to ask her for it?
That would might, I mean, options came and CCDC came. And what's the other one?
Shoot, they are getting any other
What's the other
funding,
one we
we're
get
getting strapped.
1,500 too, we have
Oh,
options.
options in,
No.
No.
child advocacy. Yeah, they didn't come either this year. Hmm. I will contact.
She said we get a report.
Okay. I will do that.
But we did give the senior citizens a 10% increase from 20 to 21, which was a pretty good increase.
That's what we gave.
I'm trying to figure out what that building repairs was with the $500. I'm not sure. I think that was the theater, and they've now rolled that into just the regular theater stuff.
And they might change something. This was having a discussion earlier about transferring trash into general, like for next year, so it's not its own thing. And if we would do that, that would be just something that you have to hear from the auditors before we do that. So,
But not into the general, it would go into the utility fund as a department.
I think it was going to general.
No, because it's a, yeah, where it generates revenue, it needs to be in a, yeah. Any questions on any of that stuff? Oh, one thing I'll point out, which looks a little confusing, on the operating transfers for 2020, we had some money going into the bond and interest in the infrastructure improvement fund. And the reason that happened out of the general last year is that I was misinformed and was told that we could use the infrastructure sales tax fund, and it didn't have to be budgeted. Well, it does need to be budgeted, but it didn't get budgeted for 2020, and so the way that we fixed it was we did some journal entries, put the money in the general fund, and transferred it out. Moving forward, you're going to see the same kind of thing, but it's coming from the infrastructure sales tax fund, and we'll see that later on, and that's where those transfers will happen from, which is where they should have been happening from anyway, but they didn't. So that's why you see nothing in the next 2 years for that in the general fund. We've got a separate one for that now.
Is that employee benefits is because of new hire, right? Or is it something else?
So the increase in, oh my gosh, yeah. So the increase in the employee benefits is the health insurance, and that's a big chunk of it, and just an increase in, that's the biggest part of it. Smaller increases in projected Medicare and unemployment and things like that that are associated with new employees that we hope to hire. Anything else on these?
Any other questions?
Okay. So I think next we have the electric and water utility. Mm. Personal services in the expenditures is, that includes another employee in the electric department, projecting, and I left that there for 2021 as well. So if we hire somebody this year, we'll probably pay them out of this fund. Up above the revenue, the collections, I talked to JR earlier today, and that's kind of projecting maybe a 3.5% increase for electric and 10% on water. We're still working on the rates, but that's what we put out there for 2022.
When you're talking about it, that comes from those few things, but those would generally be just trying to put them in. Although I do believe water needs to increase significantly, electric is a lower course. But those are the right ones to be looking at.
What is it, such a change on KMEA?
That's the event,
Yeah.
250,000.
Oh,
So oftentimes in that column, I'll use whatever the 2021 budget number was. Unless there's, like I said, if I see something that's significantly different in what we paid last year and what the trends were, if it doesn't make sense. But like that, I had to put that in because that was definitely different than what we had budgeted for that. So,
And the reason that's easy, it was not far exceeds what the budget was, but because it's the utility fund, all the ones that aren't spent to their amount cover the expense of the one that was over. It's not budget violation, it's a line item issue. So, because everything is, this is still a budget as if we spent everything right.
Yes.
The way they do that. And that's
Yeah.
why, so we have it's a flush of cash. We have revenue in addition to what we had previously based on utility, based on the tax. And so everything is going to increase. And the offset, of course, would be the cash reserve used to pay that utility bill. That makes sense? It would be, all these columns would be a percentage more, or, 240,000 more in total because you do your budget as if you spend everything.
yes, and so since you mentioned that, you'll see down there at the bottom on the right-hand side, the unencumbered cash. What they like us to do is make that a zero, and I should have added that up here. There's a column called cash forward. That's generally where we put that. And then it gives you your budget authority, but you're still down to zero for the fund. And then obviously every year there is something that's going to carry over depending on how things go. But because of that increase there, our transfers were reduced. The transfers that we had budgeted for 2021 were more than what you see here. But we can't do it because of that extra expense. Does that make sense?
We made a payment to the weed department?
No.
Okay. Apparently somebody had made a mistake. I asked him to give me some expenses, expected expenses for this year, and he asked me to make sure anything that they would fill out goes to not just weed and the bridge department. They can't fix that one, so just for wrong place. That must have happened.
I don't think we paid it, but we might have paid something in the last cycle. I'll have to look. Okay. Or it's in the bill basket now, but it's in the bill basket. Okay. Next one should be the sewer utility. This one's pretty straightforward. And I have no explanation why our operation expenses were so little last year. But that wasn't something odd because in past years it was up. So that's why I left it up. Any idea? Yeah, let me see what that is.
What is that she was actually paid for, that actually wasn't paid for, but that previously was out of operation currently? Because that's a pretty steady fund. I was going to say,
What is personal services? Or should that say personnel?
No, it probably should be personnel, but they've always called it personal services. It's salaries. Well,
I noticed on the previous page, 300,000, was it police?
Salaries and those types of things.
Sure it is.
I'm not sure. And we do transfers, smaller ones out of this fund. That's what I was going to ask you, JR. Did you see any of those that you wanted changed, you know?
I have not.
I just kind of split them, kind of between capital improvement and equipment reserve and so, okay.
Hey, they're page numbers now. That's the last 2 pages.
What was included in the refuse utility?
Do we want,
The trash and recycling.
Barely the trash and recycling.
Next page, are you on the?
you want to go to the next page?
Page 12.
But the recycling revenue doesn't go in here. It goes in the general fund. So the revenue here is just what we collect for trash services.
We know something about tourism in 2022,
Do we know something about it?
expenses for tourism expenses. Exponential.
Okay, so that is the amount of money that we have to spend. So you always we always want to try to, we can either put it there or we can put it in the cash forward column. But you always want to try to budget for and have the spend authority for the amount that you have. So no, that's just the amount that's available. If you look up above, we have $18,260. And so I put $18,000 in expenses to spend and $260 to carry forward. So that's why. It's going to be kind of similar to the special highway fund. We kind of do the same thing there so that all available funds can be spent. And that was a question I had for, I don't want to get ahead here. Are we done with the refuse and the tourism page? Those are pretty straightforward. There's not a lot that happens in those. On the special highway, JR, are you planning to expend any funds this year out of that?
Yes, I think that addition on the fourth might be utilized out of that. Part of it. I mean, yes, I do think we should probably account. I should have that actual estimate within the next few days, I would think.
Okay.
But I would guess street
Oh,
from the drainage thing, yeah.
Well, that you talked about the other night.
With special highway, let's say hypothetically, we have to do something with crossovers, and we want to do repair one or two of them. Would that come out of that?
Well, so special highways, I believe, is only funded by the money we get back through the state, right?
Yes.
We would fund that most likely somewhere, I mean, this thing is so, it's virtually worthless. It used to be a significant number that we back from the state, and we could do street work out of this fund. Now it's a token.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do.
So, yeah, I mean, any large-scale project, you can't change this revenue. It's what's sent to us.
Yeah.
But this money has to be spent on street expenses.
Yeah.
So that would be a separate fund. Unless you held on to it for, 45 years to get enough.
You can or can't use it for Fourth Street.
You can't. Any street work, yes.
So as soon as you know that, we'll plug that in there, and it'll just change it a little bit for the cash that's going to carry over into next year. That would
It'll
be,
just make it available in 2022 reduced.
yes.
Because there won't be a transfer.
But we have until the budget hearing time to decide that. Special parks, that one's the one that comes from the alcohol tax. Half of the alcohol tax that we get from the state goes into this special fund, and it can only be used for certain things. I'm not even sure, I haven't read it. We've always used it to pay for utilities at the Scout Hut. I'm not really sure how that fits into that, but that's what we've always used it for, and I'm sure there's something in the statute that designates how those funds can be spent. So,
The page never stops.
what's that?
The page never stops.
Oh.
12 to 10.
And then they went away.
Now they're gone again. I'm just trying to keep you guys on your toes. Pay attention. This next one is the infrastructure sales tax fund. So it's new then for this year. And this one's also very straightforward. And the way it works is I'll project what we're going to get for the sales tax from that 1%. And this fund was created for total transparency for people, so they can see exactly where we're at. So this is what we expect to get in 2021. Then we're going to transfer at the end of the year whatever it's going to take to make the 2022 payment and put it in the bond and interest fund, and the balance will go into the infrastructure improvement fund.
And as long as we don't until we keep borrowing and fill the slot, that the excess cash can be used for street improvements. Because it generates every year. If you know what I'm saying, you can only do bond retiring off of revenue that you know is coming the next year, but you may get excess cash getting to that point. That would be where your additional street improvements become to a point. And if we was to stop doing, I still want to do that comparison on this funded project. If we was to stop doing it through CDBG where it's funded, then this would be direct money. Other than the bond that we've already issued, it would be direct money that could go into street improvements.
And it's actually, now you're talking about that, it's actually, we have a non-budgeted fund. It's not, this is just to bring the money in and put it out, but we have a capital improvement fund specifically for that. And it's not in here because it's a non-budgeted fund. So all this money's going in there. The reason you see a cash forward of $55,000 is this year we only had budget authority for $157,000, but we're projecting we're going to get more than that. But we can't spend more than what our budget authority was, so we'll carry it over to next year. And then next year, we'll be able to move it into that other fund.
The comment I just made was that could go into street, it could go into any infrastructure. That money. So if you decide if priority shifted away from streets,
Long done. That's a good joke.
exactly. So
Human infrastructure.
the point is the infrastructure that was intended for streets. We already had that discussion, but it could be used for any infrastructure, sewer, water, and it shouldn't.
Human.
Yeah. Yeah.
that?
That's what Biden and his crew wants to, like,
Broadband access, there was a whole
engineering,
Oh.
all sorts of, they want, their infrastructure is also human infrastructure. Like, what exactly does that entail? Yeah.
Maybe you can do my next surgery on that.
Human infrastructure.
The next one is the bond and interest, and that's just exactly what it is. And that's all it's for is for the bond and interest payments. The money coming in is from the form that we just looked at, goes in here, and it's enough to pay the bond and interest for that year. The schedule of transfers, that's just what it is. Where they're coming from and where they're going. And then the last page is the library, which I don't do a lot with the library. We just plug in the numbers that we get from the county as far as what we're going to get for all the taxes, and then the auditors figure out the revitalization rebate. I don't really do much with this fund. Auditors do that one. But that one doesn't really change too much either because it's 4% mill levy. And
4.5.
no, I think it's 4.5 now. Yeah, that's right. So,
Is there money in this weekend from the state again?
yes, if you're talking about the American Rescue Plan, that's the $190,000. We're going to get half of that in July.
Is that accounted
What's
for?
that?
Is that accounted for in here?
So that does not have to be budgeted. We have a non-budgeted grant fund now. I should have mentioned that to you because I didn't bring it tonight because it's not a budgeted fund, but we, this year, actually last year, established a grant fund because of all the money that we're getting in. That it doesn't have to be budgeted. It's grants. Always before, we would put these grant monies that we would get into the general fund, and then the auditors would have to do adjustments at the end to adjust that out of the general fund because it's not funds that have to be budgeted. So now we have a grant fund, and within that fund we've got various departments for the various types of grants that we're getting. And so, for example, the concert in the park, we have a CCKCF department, and all the funds we get from them go into that department, and all the expenditures come out of that department, and we can easily track where the grant funds are going and coming in, and that's where that money will go.
And it's still up in the air on what we're going to spend it on.
Yes, we are probably not streets, but they said at the last meeting that there is discussion that other infrastructure might be considered. So that's why they said don't get in a big hurry to spend, because there may be other options. I need a massage.
People are infrastructure. People and infrastructure.
So we didn't have a lot of changes, so this ought to go pretty well. Do you guys have a time that you would want to just get back together? It'd probably take half an hour at most, once I get this back from Danielle, to just go over it and make sure it looks good as far as general fund is concerned.
And how soon do we need to do that?
So I need to have, well, we could probably do it at the next council meeting if you want to. I have to have this back to Scott by July 15th, so July 10th. It's July 10th. We can do it at the next council meeting, since there's not a lot of changes to be made.
So you're saying like a half hour earlier to go through it, or just do it at the council?
Let me get this to Danielle, and the reason I'm hesitating on that is if the mill levy comes in a lot higher than it has previously been, and we're going to need to make some other adjustments. Do you want me to just tell her to go ahead and make some adjustments in the transfers to bring it back down? Or do you have like a cap of the highest that you would want to
The
go?
right answer is yes. The taxes are too high. We'll do a utility increase for just a suggestion.
Well, yeah, good.
Water's got to go up anyway, right?
What's that?
Water
Yes.
and electric's going up, and trash is
And
going
trash.
up.
And we have always had to look at the tax levy as a total tax. The city's defense is we don't collect hardly anything. But the truth of the matter is, everybody lives in town, has high taxes. It's all good.
I would say yes.
Then I will have her manipulate the transfers to keep it.
And
Close to the same.
be it transfers or you'll need to come up with this much revenue not to have it, because then we could do utility rates as well.
I'm sorry, say that again?
So they come up with a budget and the mill's way too high to fund it. Transfers, yes. In other words, we would compensate it by transfers, by revenue of raising utility rates.
Oh, yes, yes.
I said that terribly.
Yes.
But that's what I was saying. Through transfers by way of increasing capital utility rates, because it doesn't need to be where's the money coming from, we'll raise utility rates.
Yes. Okay. Then I would say we can just do it at the meeting. It should not take long at all.
Okay.
Half hour before, 15.
Or we can just do it in the meeting, probably. Yeah, because I don't.
Because that, for Larry, that rushes him,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, I'll
if
just-
we can do it in the meeting, let's just keep it there.
I'll just put it on the agenda and yeah, I can't imagine it's going to take long at all.
Okay.
I'll send it out ahead of time for you all to look at.
Okay.
And I'll make these small changes and, yeah.
Okay. So your motion to adjourn. Amanda, Dale,
I don't know, Darren was
everybody
standing up.
stand up.
Darren wants to stay longer.
Has anybody got any high Midwest bill?